Hello, everybody. Old Buck Dave back again one more time with episode 224 of Two Old Bucks. And with me is my partner, who would be
the other old Buck Dell.
the other Old Buck Dale. And we're going to have a special guest who I'm going to introduce in a few minutes. But first, we're going to engage in our typical few minutes of mindless banter here. Old guys talking.
It's not mine. It's not so much mine as the fact I was just thinking when you said one more time. That's pretty much the way we got to look at it, right?
Yeah,
One more time.
We get another one in. That's good. Yeah.
Because I was going to say I had one of them days where I don't know why I wasted the day. We don't have many days left, Dave. We know that, and I totally squandered the whole day. I was playing cards, and I'm not a big card player, but I was playing cards with two gentlemen, both of which have very difficult times walking. And so sitting and playing cards is, very important to them when they can do that. And after I sit for any length of time, I can hardly walk because my legs are numb, you know what I mean? So
yeah, well.
So that's what I was doing today. Otherwise, I haven't accomplished any major, anything major since last I talked to you. But I understand you ran into some interesting things.
I had an interesting day yesterday. Yes, I'm still up here. I'm going to be up here a couple more weeks in Black Mountain, North Carolina, where it's just gorgeous and up at 2,600 feet. So it's always cooler. Loving it. So yesterday afternoon, I was doing a bike ride. And I was coming down a long downhill, and it was tapering off a little bit, so I wasn't really going that fast at this point. And then there was a bend at the bottom of the hill, and as I'm getting closer, I see a large black object behind the bushes at the bend there. I'm thinking, and I look, and it walks out. It's a bear, old black bear. And I thought, oh, great. And then like 3 seconds later, come out two cubs, and I'm thinking, uh-oh. Mother and two cubs. I don't think I want to go any further. Right. So I stopped I'm thinking like Shakespeare, like discretion's the better part of valor. And I rode back up the hill. Okay. Which you don't look for extra reasons to do that, but I did. And then I putzed around up there. I did some side roads in about 15, 20 minutes. I thought, okay, everything will be good now. So I went back down the hill. Don't see the bear. I go right around the bend. Boom! There are the three bears, but they're in somebody's garbage. They've got garbage cans sprawled everywhere. So they didn't care about me. They were having a ball. So, but that was my exciting bear sighting.
When you first you mentioned that to me, and I said, well, maybe he's going to think he can just go by very quickly, and then Mama Bear will quickly say, oh, we're under attack. And next thing you know, it'll be chasing you down the road. So you were wise to play that. Play that cautiously.
I don't think I could outrun it. Yeah. Otherwise, I'm just hanging out here. Just finished the short story collection Heart Songs by Annie Proulx. And I just started another collection, Liberation Day by George Saunders. If you recall, we read Love Letter on our podcast several months back. That's in this collection, and it's an autographed book. My sister-in-law saw George Saunders up at Chautauqua and got an autographed copy for me, so it's a special book for me. So that's what I've been doing. Before we get to our guest, I do have a couple letters from afar that we need to share with our readers. You talked about your experience last episode fixing a kitchen drawer for your neighbor. So we got one listener wrote in and said, I'm so impressed that Dale can lie on the floor and get back up. Amazing to me. I would look like a cockroach on its back.
There's a lot of people that can't do that at our age, Dave.
That's true.
I'm fortunate to be able to get down. I mean, I can actually still go underneath the sink and come back up 2 or 3 times.
The same day, yeah.
I mean, I suffer for it later, but I can still do that. So
yeah, I know we got.
Who would have thought that would be a blessing at our age to be able to get off the floor?
You can get off the floor. Yeah, and then we had a comment on your dentist visit, and this person said, "I'm so afraid to go to the dentist. I have to take half a Xanax to get my teeth cleaned." So I would take a whole one, but I'm afraid I would fall asleep driving home. So there you go.
Well, that's my theory is you can talk. That's a conversation that you can develop anywhere, anytime, because everybody's got an experience with that. Again, lucky that I can still afford to fix them. There'll be a time probably I won't give a damn.
But enough of that. Let's
Yeah,
get
enough
on
of
to
that.
the real reason we're here today.
Yeah.
I'd like to introduce our guest. Our special guest today is Dr. Craig Benjamin. He's an Australian American historian who is Professor Emeritus of History in the Frederick J. Meyer Honors College at Grand Valley State University in Michigan, where he taught East Asian civilization, big history, ancient Central Asian history, and world history historiography. That's a new word. I had to look that one up. He's published over 100 books and papers. Craig grew up in Brisbane, Australia. He dropped out of college at age 19, spending the next 25 years as a professional musician and jazz educator. He made a major career change to the study of history, gaining his PhD in ancient history from Macquarie University, and he can correct me if I'm butchering these words, University in 2003 with his dissertation, The Yangtze, Origin, Migration, and the Conquest of Northern Bactria. Craig taught at Grand Valley until 2020, whereupon he retired to Australia. It was apparently a short retirement, as he now spends part of the year cruising the world and lecturing passengers on the port cities and countries along the way. I met him on the Azamara Baltic cruise. I never missed one of his entertaining and very educational lectures and was lucky enough to have dinner with him one evening where I learned more about his fascinating journey through life. Jazz musician, trekker, cyclist, traveler, historian, author, lecturer, and much, much more. So welcome, Dr. Craig Benjamin.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Dell. It's a real pleasure to be here. I do appreciate the invitation.
So we're happy to have you, and I think our listeners are really going to enjoy this episode because I enjoyed every minute that I listened to you speak on the cruise. So before we start, where are you now? Are you home now?
Yes, I'm at home in a small coastal town on the east coast of Australia called Bateman's Bay. It's about 50,000 people or so live up and down the coast here. And it's a very dramatic coastline of steep rocky cliffs, lots of bushland. There's about 26 beaches within a few minutes of my house here.
Wow.
Some of them are rock, some of them are pebbles, some are sand, and hundreds of kangaroos live here as well. Hundreds on the beaches, in the bush, in my front yard, chewing my grass. So
Oh
it's a
gosh.
beautiful part of Australia.
They're like alligators in Florida, I guess. They're
Yeah.
everywhere.
Or deer in Michigan. Yeah,
Or
exactly.
deer.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah. That's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so life is good down there. So how's the temperature down there?
Well, it's early in the morning here, my time, and it's pretty cold actually. It's close to freezing, which is
Wow.
unusual in Australia. Nowhere near as cold as winter in Michigan was, but it's pretty darn cold. And unlike our big old Michigan house, which had huge hot water radiators throughout the house, every room was always so warm when you walked inside there, even in the middle of winter. Here we've got like reverse cycle air conditioners, one at each end of the house, and they're pretty effective, but you don't run them all night. So when you wake up in the morning, it's pretty darn cold here.
Ah, pretty
Yeah.
cold. Okay.
But it's warming up now. I can feel it.
You're
So
pretty cold, and Dill's cooking. He's concerned about heat attacks.
heat attacks.
Heat attack.
93 degrees Celsius. Here.
93.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Fahrenheit, excuse me.
Well, of course, here in Australia, it will get very hot in the summer. We'll get up into the 30s Celsius, but right now, yeah, pretty chilly winter.
Mm. So that's right. It's winter down there. Yeah, we're all reversed here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So as I mentioned to everybody, I met you on the cruise, on the Azamara cruise through the Scandinavia and the Baltics. And do you have another cruise gig coming up here?
I do actually. Uh, I cruise now for about 4 to 5 months a year, mostly with Azamara, a couple of other lines your listeners may know, Silver Sea, Windstar,
Hmm.
and next year I'm doing an African cruise with Regent Seven Seas. Another, they're all the same
Okay.
sort of line, roughly 500 to 700 passengers, luxury ships, as you know, Dave. Beautiful food, great service. But I tend to choose now by itinerary. So I thoroughly enjoyed the most recent cruise, which was with you in the Baltic, and we can talk about that maybe in a
Yeah.
minute. But I am booked again on the same ship, would you believe, Azamara Journey. My wife and I will be flying back to London in about 3 weeks to join the journey in Portsmouth. And then it's essentially a European cruise, Atlantic coast of France and then Spain, and then a lot of interesting ports in the Mediterranean, ending eventually in Athens about 2 months
Mm,
later. So, yeah,
nice.
looking forward to
Should be
that.
great. Yeah. That's so about the cruise that I was on with you. So what did you what were your high points or high cities on that cruise, on the Baltic cruise?
I was actually really moved by that cruise, more than I expected to be. I had just done, that was the fourth one back to back. And Azamara tends to, they're bringing us all the way over from Australia. They prefer it if we stay on board and do a few back to back. So the previous ones have been very interesting as well, including a Norway intensive, which went right to the very top of Norway, well
Mm,
beyond the Arctic Circle, and then back down again. But what I found really moving about the Baltic was just how close the modern history of that. When I say modern history, I mean the history of the last century or so felt in all of those ports that we visited there. Certainly, it's a very beautiful part of the world. Stockholm, I think, is now currently my favorite city on the planet in terms of the beauty of the buildings and just the whole vibe of the city and the islands that it's located on and so on.
yeah.
But it was when we moved across to, and I'm sure you felt the same. I know all the passengers love Stockholm, but
Yeah.
when we moved across to Finland, I started to get a real sense of the Second World War and the Cold War, feeling a lot closer than almost anywhere else in the world that I've been, except maybe Hiroshima and some Japanese cities where it still feels very close as well. But all of those, the small port in Finland, and then the major ports of the three Baltic cities were all quite extraordinary. And I was researching and lecturing, as you know, on the ancient history, whatever we knew about that, but more particularly their experiences in the Second World War and then under the Soviets during the Cold War. And it just felt very real being there. Uh, for example, thinking about Gdansk and talking about Lech Walesa and the Solidarity movement, which essentially brought the entire communist machine to its knees, these striking dock workers. I found myself very moved as we sort of moved around that city and also just looking at the construction work or reconstruction that was still going on all over that city from the devastation that had occurred at the end of the Second World War, 80 years before. And they were still trying to rebuild their infrastructure and their buildings and so on. So I found that whole experience just, as I say, really moving, quite emotional in many ways. And I'm so glad I've been to that part of the world now because history just came alive for me there. You might remember one experience that I mentioned when we were in Gdansk. We were talking about, well, we had a Polish group come on board, a band, Polish quintet,
Yes.
played great music, great, fabulous polkas and so on. But then you just turn your camera to the left, and there were huge monuments to the very first battles of the Second World War that were fought right there beside where our ship was moored. And
Yeah.
this sort of juxtaposition of the pleasure we are experiencing from this band and the recovery of this country of Poland from the sheer devastation it had experienced, not that long ago, was really very powerful. So it was quite an amazing experience being in the Baltic, and I'm so glad I went there.
Yeah, I had only been to Lithuania before. I hadn't been to the other Baltics, but yeah, from Helsinki on down through the Baltics and into Poland, you got the same story every place, and they talked about being oppressed and the communists and the Nazis, and how concerned they are about the way the direction that the world's headed right now, or could be
Exactly.
headed.
Well, the
Yeah.
border, as you know, with Russia is just so close to all of those cities that we visited. And thinking about, so I had been to that region before, but as I think you know, and you might mention this a bit later, as a boy, essentially, I hadn't been there for a long, long time, and so I really didn't grasp the sort of the depth of the experience when I was there a long time ago. But thinking of Lithuania and the one port we went to of Klaipeda, and I was up on deck about 10 o'clock at night as we were pulling back and leaving. And so many local people just came down to the dock and just stood there sort of watching and waving. And Klaipeda is, it's not a beautiful city like Riga or
Right.
Tallinn. Or,
It's not a capital city. Yeah.
no, it's a sort of a working class port city. And it
Hmm.
just felt like these people were coming down to say almost, thank you for coming here. We've been through a lot in this city and we're doing the best we can. I
Yeah.
did a bus trip that day, an excursion, and the things they were pointing out were like an American university has been built here. Look at this. And here's a new apartment block. And here we've been able to restore an old German building here and so on that was utterly flattened by the Red Army and so on. It's like these were the gems of Klaipeda, which actually became more and more meaningful, as the day went on. And then to see everyone come down and sort of almost wave to us at the end, it felt
Yeah.
like in gratitude that we'd been there, that we come to their port. It was very powerful, as I say, a
Yeah.
very powerful experience.
Yeah. As you know, we were picked up and spent the day with my wife's relatives there,
Yeah,
and they also, before we had the party, they took us around Klaipeda and showed us just little pieces of artwork, modern art, ancient art that are tucked away in every corner here and there, and they're very, very, very proud of the culture and the artwork that they have. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Yeah.
yeah, as they should be. Yeah, very, very interesting. So the next trip, I've been to all of these places next time, several times before, the various Mediterranean ports, Spanish ports, French Atlantic coast ports. You mentioned you got the same sort of story all the way from Finland down the coast, which is true because those countries all had the same experience. And of course, coming down the Atlantic coast of France, I've also got a very similar story to tell there, mostly about Nazi occupation and then liberation after D-Day. And then something we don't talk so much about, but like we think D-Day, everyone's landed, it's all over almost now. But the battle to take cities like Cherbourg and St. Malo from these deeply committed Nazi forces that were there defending them, from mostly from American troops,
Hmm.
were really these are really challenging battles, really bloody battles. So I'm looking forward to sharing that. I mean, it's not a pleasant subject, but sharing these similar experiences that all these cities went through. Again, at the end of the Second World War. But as I think you know, Dave, I'm an ancient historian, so I'm always very interested in Roman occupation and looking at parallels between Roman occupation and German occupation and so on,
Yeah.
drawing these
Yeah.
long parallels over time and space.
Yeah. Well, Dale, I think you had a question you had
Yeah,
sent
yeah,
me.
yeah, Greg. I was fascinated by what you're doing. I mean, I have some interest in history myself, but my question to you is, how did you do the first thing? How did you get on the first boat? I mean, whatever transition from what you were doing, maybe you were, playing in a band someplace and someone said, do you want to be on a boat? How'd you make that first step from the dock to that boat? And then now look what you made a career out of it. How did you do that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Dell, actually. I just thinking, ironically, I did actually play on boats when I was a musician too, way back. So, 'cause, a lot of ships, as you know, employ musicians. So yeah, I'd had some experience. And we might get into this later, but my mum and dad decided to move our whole family from Brisbane, Australia to Europe back in the 60s. And so I did a couple of long ocean voyages all the way from Australia to Europe. And then 5 years later from Europe back to Australia again. But I was teaching at Grand Valley State in Michigan, which is between Grand Rapids and the Michigan Lakeshore. And I just had an email out of the blue one day saying, we think you might be a good fit for a cruise ship lecturing. And it was from an agency actually based in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, a very good agency. And they have contracts with these cruise lines that I mentioned earlier to provide lecturers on board for various itineraries around the world. So they gave me a couple of sort of audition cruises, basically on two small ships for a week each in the Caribbean. And they went well. And the passengers, it's all about passengers, thumbs up or down, of course.
Mm.
Passengers gave me a good rating. So then that was 12 years ago. So I've just worked for this agency ever since. And they will send out at the start of the year now, here's Azamara's cruises for the next 12 months or Silver Sea. Let us know what you're interested in. And I've been doing it long enough now and I've got a good enough reputation that basically we pick and choose where we'd like to go and we get signed up. And then I spend about a year preparing a whole series of quite
Mm.
complex lectures and then head off and deliver them on the ship. So,
Well,
yeah,
with that explanation, I can see that you are not unfamiliar with ships, and so I mean, through some just basic travel. But I didn't know that there was a group of people that looked for talent. I didn't know there was such a thing like that they could do that. So anyhow,
yeah,
someone got wind of your ability, or you were on the list, and
yeah.
since you're familiar, you know, that's one of them things where it wasn't miraculous; it just worked out for you. You just
That's right, Bill.
happened to be at the
Yeah,
right place at the right time, and you were a musician on boats anyhow, so you had a feel for what it might be like. I think
yeah.
it's a fantastic career.
Just big picture again, United States is still very much the land of opportunity for academics in a way that no other country in the world is. So despite
Oh,
political divisions and so on within the country, there's a huge academic sector there, and there's also all the top publishers. I've done a lot of work for the teaching company, which puts out these great courses and so on. And then there's agencies such as this one in Florida, which is somehow got a recruitment division that's always looking online to identify folks that they think might be a good fit for giving lectures on ships. So all these things happened to me, and all the books I've got to write and so on. I'm pretty sure because I was living in the US, right time, right place, definitely, where these opportunities just come to you in a way that couldn't possibly happen in a much smaller country like Australia, where our
mm,
population is tiny compared to the US. Less people here than in Florida, and also only about 40 universities compared to thousands and thousands in the US. So that was definitely right time, right place. And most academics around the world realize that United States is still the place to go
That's the
to pursue a
place.
successful career in academia.
Mm.
you can get in and you can stay here. But
Yeah, yeah.
also, I questioned you. You get this email. What do you say to your wife and say, "Well, dear"?
I said, look at this. Wow, how about this? Should we give this a try? And she loves traveling, and who doesn't love luxury ships? And your, your bed made twice a day, and your meal served to you, and visiting
Yeah,
beautiful places around the world. She said, let's do it, Craig. She said, let's go for it.
it is kind of the good life. Yeah.
That
It's a good life.
that's a perfect way to have a good marriage. Someone to say, "Listen, my job entails all this benefits to you. All you got to do is smile and enjoy yourself." So,
And to be
uh,
fair to Pamela, she's been very good to me over the years. I've my specialized field is Central Asia, ancient Central Asia. So I've traveled by myself many times into Mongolia or the Uzbekistan and Western
wow,
China, and often leading tours for the Smithsonian or groups like that. And she's been very good to say, just let me go for 3 weeks or a month and so on. So I figured now in this sort of later stage of our lives together, this is a fantastic way of like
fantastic.
repaying us both somehow, for
Yeah, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
So you're
yeah,
familiar with those places in the Far East.
yeah.
I I'm thinking you would have to be somewhere about 97 years old to accomplish all this in a lifetime. I mean, I am totally envious here, Greg. I'm telling you.
I've been very
I mean,
fortunate, Bill. Very
Well,
I
yeah,
fortunate.
would,
let me make a quick comment on
uh,
that. And I think by this time our listeners probably have figured out that he's a pretty sharp dude.
yeah.
Uh, they asked us to fill out a survey on the cruise. And of course, I gave Craig like A plus plus. I said you got to keep this fella. He's and I did not go on the cruise looking for history lectures or anything like this. Was really this was cream on the cake here for me. And but he was just excellent. I learned so much in an hour. And it was incredible. And then you'd go on shore, and I'd do a walking tour, and I hear the people giving the same history that he gave me on the ship. I said, "Yeah, that's okay. I remember that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's nice." So after having said that, though, Craig, you've mentioned a couple times your youth. You showed us some pictures on the cruise of you when you were a young boy with your family traveling the world. Is this what gave you the travel bug? Tell us a little bit about how that was growing up.
Yes, I'm sure it is what gave me the travel bug. Born in Brisbane, which back in the 50s when I was born was a pretty sleepy, quiet Australian city, but not that thrilling. My dad was a journalist. He worked for a newspaper, but then he made the transition early on to television news when it was very brand new in Australia in the 50s. He became a television news journalist, and he was sent overseas by his network to cover some stories in Britain and in Europe. And he came back to Brisbane, and he said to my mother, "It's so parochial and boring here. Apologies to anyone from Brisbane who's listening to this, because it's not like that now. Now it's a thriving, dynamic city." But he said, "I want to go and live in England." And Mum said, "Sure, we'll do that." And what I don't think you do know, Dave, is that my father was also a very good jazz musician. So he started taking a lot of gigs at night, journalism by day, playing at night, saving money, saving money. And next thing you know, Mum and Dad and the three of us on a ship heading for Greece. And we spent the next 5 years living in Europe. Dad had like a 10-day holiday over Easter and then a 6-week holiday every summer. And for 5 years, he planned in those Easter trips, traveling all over Britain in our camping van. And then in those 6-week trips, we did these huge, epic driving camping trips all over different parts of Europe. He planned everything meticulously. This was the Cold War, so it was all Western Europe. We couldn't go, too far east. But we explored everywhere from Scandinavia to Gibraltar, and from, the French coast to the Swiss Alps and so on. And so we just loved it. I would sit in the back of this van and we'd just travel all over Europe and then camp somewhere exotic every night. So this is between the ages of sort of 11 and 15, 16 for me. And I did get a bit bored sometimes with the travel. I remember sitting in the back of the van reading, I used to love the novels of Alistair MacLean, this like adventure thriller writer.
Yeah.
I'd be sitting in the back reading The Guns of Navarone or something like that, And Dad would say, "For heaven's sake, Craig, put that book down. There's Spain out the window, Look at Spain. Stop reading that damn book." And, so look, yeah, "That's great, Dad. Thank you." Straight back to me. It's exasperated my poor father, who meticulously planned these itineraries, so we saw everything there was. So, yeah, and then came back to Australia after that. None of us really wanted to come back, but we'd all promised our grandparents, my mother and father's parents, we wouldn't stay away forever. So we came back to Brisbane, which was still pretty sleepy, and just had 5 years of these incredible memories fermenting in my brain, giving me very much a love of history, geography, landscapes, and just the sheer joy of travel, moving on every day, seeing amazing places, meeting amazing people. So that's been with me ever since. And how lucky was I that, my parents had.
Honest. So that gave you the lust for travel and for history and learning about the world.
Yeah.
But you became a jazz musician at 19. Tell us how you got there.
Yeah. So I came back for the last 2 years of high school in Australia. Then I did very well in high school and got a scholarship to a very good university in Australia, the Australian National University in Canberra, and did a year and a half there and then dropped out. By this stage, I very much had the jazz bug. And my best friend and I were playing a lot of jazz together. Like my father, I was playing flutes and saxophones. Dad had taken me around to jam sessions probably from the age of 2 and sit me on the floor while he and the band were playing and give me some maracas to play or a tambourine. And so I had that bug really strongly from a very young age. And so it was inevitable that I took up my father's instruments, actually. I learned clarinet first and then flute and then saxophone, and decided that that's what I had to do with my life, and dropped out of university, much to my father's horror. He said, apart from the fact that it's a very hard way to make a living, the thing that you love most in life right now is going to become just a job to you.
It's going to be work. It's going to be work.
It's just going to be work.
Not fun, not necessarily. Yeah.
And he said, even if you get to New York and you're playing second alto in the Buddy Rich Big Band or whatever, you're going to come home from a gig, put the saxophone away, and it's just going to be work. It won't be what you have now. And I, of course, totally disregarded that and said, "No, Dad, you're wrong. That'll never happen." And it took 20 years, but it did happen in the end. We were successful musicians. We played all over Australia, around the world, other places, playing jazz. But in the end, I remember coming home one night from a gig at a big working man's club here in the outskirts of Sydney. Great club, good band. We had 3-piece front line, trumpet, sax, trombone, great rhythm section, good singers, very well paid gig. But I just put my saxophone away when I got home one night, and I thought, I just don't want to touch it again. I just don't want to do that again.
Wow.
And it was quite a profound moment. And I actually remember it. And again, apologies to anybody who loves this song, because I like this song as well. It was "Tie a Yellow Ribbon Round the Old Oak Tree."
Oh.
Dip me in.
Is that
because
the
we played it
Tony Orlando and Dawn?
at
Is that?
Dawn. It's
Yeah.
actually a really good song. Yeah, like he's
For,
coming out of
probably
prison. And he's
for the
yeah,
first 10 times you hear it, I guess.
yeah. But the manager of the club, his wife loved that song. We had to play it as the first song of the second set every night. And in the end, my fingers almost I could hardly bum 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 ba-dum, bum 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 and I almost couldn't do it, you know. So it was that song, I think that, and I quite like that song now. But anyway, so I thought I can't do this anymore. I was teaching. I had a lot of music students. I could make a living without playing, and I thought I'm going to go back to university and do something different. Go back and study some history. So that's what happened. But up to that moment, I had a very good career. And you know, as you know, David and Dell, you can't really make a good living out of jazz unless you're in New York or something like that.
Mm.
So you take gigs from whatever other opportunities come your way, pop bands, country shows, whatever, you know. So when I was playing modern jazz, it was great in modern jazz clubs, you know, playing like Eric Dolphy and Coltrane sort of music. And
Mm.
I love doing that, but that's only about maybe 10% at the most of what you get to perform if you're trying to make a living as a musician.
Hmm.
And it was the rest that I just got turned off by after a while.
So are you still doing any gigs on the side here, or keeping
When we
the?
lived in Michigan, I did a lot of gigs there, mostly on flute with double bass player and guitar. We did a lot of cocktail parties and you know that sort of thing, good background
Uh-huh.
music. I
Okay.
have played on ships. I played on Azamara ships. One of the best recently was in South America, cruising down the coast of Brazil, and we were coming to Rio, and I was lecturing about the music of Brazil, samba, and of course bossa nova, talking about Antonio Carlos Jobim, and you know, and the albums of Stan Getz and Astrid Gilberto,
Yeah.
and I said, but wait, I shouldn't be talking about bossa nova. Why don't I bring out my friend, the guitarist from the band? And almost hidden up my sleeve, like in the movie Anchorman, was my flute that I pulled out. And the audience had no idea I was a musician. And we started playing "Girl from Ipanema." The whole
Yeah.
room. It was in
uh,
the very room that you saw me in the cabaret on the on the
yeah.
show.
Okay. Yeah.
I was
Oh,
going,
that's
oh my
great.
God, he's a musician too. Like
He's a musician too. That's great.
that was a
That's
great moment. That was a lot of fun.
ah. Okay.
Yeah.
So but you had this epiphany, and you decided, yeah, I'm going to do something different,
Yeah.
and decided to go into history, which I guess you can understand given the travel that you had done and your background. Um, why East Asian history?
Yeah, actually, I'd loved history all through school, and I did very well in my final like AP equivalent exams in both ancient and modern history. Well, Australia, as you know, is geographically quite close to Southeast Asia and East Asia, much closer to that part of the world than it is to United States or certainly to Europe, which is right around the other side. So a lot of Australians are interested in Asian history of one sort or another, and I was I completed my bachelor's degree just in ancient history. At that stage, I was a Roman guy, very interested in the ancient Romans. And then looking around for a subject for a master's dissertation, which became a PhD dissertation. And I was wondering how far Roman culture had spread in towards Central Asia. I knew that Roman coins had been found in ports around the coast of India, for example. So there was a lot of Indian Ocean maritime trade going on. But I wondered about Central Asia. And a professor at my university, who's now become my very good friend, Professor David Christian, said, have you ever heard of the Kushans? That's Kushans. And I never had heard of them. He said, you should look into them. They controlled much of Central Asia during this first great Silk Roads period. They basically facilitated the trade between the ancient Chinese and the ancient Romans. So I
Okay.
looked into them and I became a specialist in them. And that dissertation you mentioned, the Uecha, their origins and so on, they were the ancestors of the Kushans, this tribe that migrated from Western China into what is essentially Afghanistan today, went on to establish this massive empire that controlled all of the crossroads of those great trade routes, the ancient Silk Roads. And so I became, just through research and writing, like a international specialist in the Kushans,
Hmm.
and that led me to more and more deeply into East Asian history. Because to understand what was happening in the center, you had to
Hmm.
know what was happening in the Mediterranean world, which I knew quite a lot about, and also in the Chinese world. And so I just automatically became more and more interested in East Asian history. Yeah, Silk Roads is a good fit for broadening your perspectives in both directions because this is what's happening in the center, but it makes no sense unless you understand this big picture all around it. So
Okay.
yeah, so
Yeah,
that's how that happened.
that's how that happened.
Yeah,
Okay. Now you mentioned the Silk Road. You've traveled the
yeah.
Silk Road then. So you would be our second guest who has traveled the Silk Road. That's
Oh,
pretty impressive. Yeah.
yeah. Well,
We
some
we
parts are only some parts are accessible. Uh, Obviously, much of Western China, so Gansu and Xinjiang provinces in the far west of China, they were crucial parts of the Silk Roads, and you can travel those. There's a lot of tour companies. I mentioned Smithsonian, and I've worked for other travel companies as well that will take tours there. A lot of folks I've met on ships also do Silk Road trips. Then the central part is fine. So all through Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, that's where the great trading cities of Central Asia were and are, like Samarkand, Bukhara, and so on. But then once you get any further west, you're in Iran, which, although I've got many colleagues there, academic colleagues, just not a safe place for us to travel at the moment. And then
hmm
the routes went through Iran, down across the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, so through Iraq today, and then through Syria and onto the Mediterranean coast. So that entire western section is really not a feasible place to travel the Silk Roads today. But
hmm
everywhere else, to the east and so on, is very feasible. So yeah, I'd recommend to any of your listeners that are thinking about that, just have a look online. There are many companies that lead really good tours into Central Asia, but also Western China, beautiful parts of the world. So yeah, I've got to do that many times over the years as a guide lecturer is my official role.
Okay. And I mean, it's the Silk Road was, like, as you said very eloquently. I mean, it was so important for trade, and trade is what really brings countries together and brings people who may feel differently about each other, but they trading with each other makes them understand each other, and so it's quite a good influence for the world.
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more. And a lot of my lectures do focus on trade connections. And a lot of my books also are focused on trade between different parts of the world because it's been, even since like the Paleolithic, the old Stone Age, long before people became sedentary and started farming and, settling down, even when humans were essentially nomadic foragers, we were trading long distances. You've got something up here that we really want. So in Australia, for example, we've got special shells, pearl shells from the far north, the tropical north, that end up way down the bottom of the country that have clearly come through these long distance land trade routes, through the Australian deserts and so on. And, Polynesian migrants who settle all the islands of the Pacific. You've got these massive trade connections from like Madagascar to Easter Island, tens of thousands of miles,
hmm
So trade, exchanging our goods for your goods has been one of the fundamental functions of like human societies from the very beginning. And so that's a very good theme for me as a lecturer to explore. Pretty well in every talk I ever give, at some stage, there'll be some discussion of, what was traded here, why did people settle here, what was the valuable resource that was available here, and so on.
hmm
And I agree. So, I'm not at all political, and my role as a lecturer, a public lecturer, is not to be political. But the more we facilitate free trade, I think, just in general, as a historian, the better for the world.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, history has shown that time and again. It shrinks the world. And in your bio, or at least there's a lot about you online. You're you're a pretty public guy.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
it says that you've been a trekker also in the past. So you've done more than just take people on tours of the Silk Road.
Yeah.
Tell us about some of your interesting treks that you've done over the year.
Yeah, sure. I got this sort of mountain hiking bug. I mentioned we moved to the UK and lived in London as a from 11 to sort of 16, and I joined a bunch of outdoor clubs in London, um, uh, uh, mountain hiking, mountain trekking, cross country skiing, and so on. So even as a kid, I'd come home to mum and say, "Mum, is it okay if I go to the Yorkshire Moors for 2 weeks and go cross country skiing in the middle of winter?" And she'd say, "Yes, darling, that's fine. Off you go." Or, "Mum, is it okay if we go to Scotland to go ice climbing for a week?" Yeah, that's fine. So they were very
Wow,
good to me, my parents. They
that's
they
great.
trusted all these instructors. I got to meet them all. So I
Uh-huh.
became a rock climber, did a lot of ice climbing and so on as well.
Whew.
Um, But then as I got older and married and had children, transitioned to sort of mountain trekking, often very high altitude trekking. I know you said you're at 2,600 feet, so you would have felt it when you first got there. But I have done some wonderful treks in the Himalayas, in Nepal. I've trekked up some great mountains in Mongolia. Been to Africa, trekked in the Mount Kenya region to the summit of Mount Kenya, and then Kilimanjaro, of course. So these are all,
He
these
says,
are
of
not,
course.
well, I mean, if you go to Africa and you're a trekker, what are you
Yeah,
going
Yeah,
to
you
do?
got to
got to
go
do
there. Yeah, you got to do.
Kilimanjaro, certainly.
Go
Yeah.
to Kili.
Yeah.
So, I used to be a good technical climber with ropes and crampons and proper
Wow.
rock climbing and so on. And but as an older man now, I enjoy just trekking in beautiful mountains, even though the altitude is, once you get above, say, 13,000 feet or whatever, you really feel it. And when you're up to 18, 19, 20,000 feet above sea level, it's brutal. And then you think those elite Himalayan mountaineers climb another 8,000 feet above this again without oxygen
Yeah.
on some of the steepest, most dangerous ice slopes you can imagine in the world, and sort of just kick their way up with their two axes and their crampons, and get to the top before breakfast.
Yeah. It is incredible, isn't it?
Talk about the
I
elite sports people of the world. Himalayan
yeah.
mountaineers, just
I
unbelievable.
mean, the highest I've ever trekked was a little over 13 in
Yeah.
Bolivia, Mount Yamani. And I'll tell you what, you take 3 steps and you got to take, you're
Oh
gasping
yeah,
for
you
breath.
feel it.
It's incredible. So I really have total respect for anybody that can do that. It's
Yeah.
amazing. It's
I'll
amazing.
give a plug for this company that I've always gone with. It's called KE Expeditions, capital K, capital E, based in the Lake District in Britain. And they run treks to different parts of the Himalaya, actually all over the world. But they're very scientific. So you're talking about getting to 13,000 feet. They're very, very good about, you need to increase the red blood cells in your system and so on to help you improve the uptake of less oxygen in the air. So they do it very carefully. You'll climb only so far each day. You'll camp every third day and have a rest day. But on that rest day, you'll climb up much higher, then come back to this lower camp again, then do it again for 3 days, up back to the camp and so on. And so gradually your body acclimatizes. If you suddenly get out of an aeroplane at 13,000 feet or whatever, or you fall over and almost die. But if you
Yeah.
slowly make, actually, there's a funny, it was not really funny for the people, but there's a Japanese entrepreneur who decided to build a hotel in Nepal up above the Sherpa capital of Namche Bazaar. So it's probably at around 13, 14,000 feet already. And he thought the plan was, I'll bring a wealthy Japanese businessman here. We'll fly to Kathmandu, take a helicopter up, we'll get out, and they can spend a week in looking at Mount Everest through the glass windows. It's right there. In fact, it's called the Everest View Hotel. But
Wow.
some of his clients died very quickly because they're coming from sea level and getting out of the helicopter and going falling over. And
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
so now they pump oxygen around the hotel. And so you wear a mask from the helicopter to get in the hotel. Then you're inside like you're in a goldfish bowl with nice oxygen flowing. Us trekkers come up. We'll sit out on the terrace and have a cup of tea. And 4 kids inside the glass behind us going, "Hi, guys." We were too nervous to come out.
Oh,
That's a good
oh,
example of, it was a great business model, but he forgot one
I
thing.
forgot what people
The
die.
altitude. Yeah.
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 Uh,
I shouldn't laugh. It's not funny, but
yeah.
Hey,
it's a
Craig,
weird situation. Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
All
No,
of this adventure type stuff, has it had any toll on you physically? I mean,
not really. No, no.
really?
I've had a few falls, Dell, but nothing serious. Bumped my head a few times, um, but no, I mean, you do feel, during a trek, you feel pretty down, like physically down. I had my blood oxygen level taken in Nepal. There was a clinic that's staffed by these volunteers for the Sherpa people. It was like 82, and
Wow.
he said if this was 82 and back in Michigan, you'd be in hospital right
You'd
now
be
for
in a
sure.
hospital. Yeah.
But up here, it's pretty normal. But no, you feel it. The whole system feels depressed. Feels like you've got a cold all the time. You're struggling to breathe even after 2 weeks there. It's still hard work. But when you come back, you recover pretty quick. And knock on wood, I've had no major falls or breaks or anything like that.
Good for you.
I shouldn't have said
That's
that. I'm going to knock on
amazing.
wood.
That,
Well, speaking of falls and breaks,
yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
It came out at dinner that we're both cycling fans, and we had fun comparing Tour
Oh
de
my.
France results every day, and
Right.
so you were also a cyclist?
I was never a very good cyclist, Dave. Unlike you, you're clearly still riding at a good level. I love cycling, but it was more the spectacle of the sport itself as
Hmm.
as an observer that drew me in. And I got to see the Tour de France on a number of occasions in France, also in Switzerland once, and in Denmark once as well, and even in where was it? The Isle of Man, somewhere in Britain too, where the first couple of days were raced in Britain. So I've gotten to see Lance Armstrong, for example, and many of the other great cyclists at starts in France or flying by somewhere in in Brittany or so I've always loved the sport, loved to watch it. Beside my bed right now, I'm reading the Australian cyclist Cadel Evans' autobiography, which is
Oh
just
yeah,
so
Cadell, sure, sure.
he won the Tour de France.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and he did it. There's a lot about drugs in the sport in the book, and all of his mentors were drug free, and they said you're going to do this, but no drugs. And but so many like sensational news arriving. You wake up in the morning on day 12 of the tour, and oh no, this whole team's been disqualified, or these individuals have been disqualified, or a
Hmm.
car has been found associated with this team full of EPO or other enhancing
Yeah,
drugs. It's
yeah.
really quite a powerful book. And Cadell and a number of his colleagues are just committed to doing it drug free.
Doing it
Uh,
clean. Yeah.
it's yeah, and he remembers just watching guys do superhuman things. Like here am I fully stretched, going up I don't know Mont Ventoux or somewhere like that, and these others come by and they just fly past me as though it's nothing. And
Yeah.
he's thinking, how the heck are they doing that? How
Now we know. Now we know how they did it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
Look, I stood right beside Lance Armstrong in Albi at the start of one of the legs many years ago. Couldn't have been a nicer guy. He's chatting to all of us, very cheerful and friendly. And they introduced the riders from last to first at each start day. And so Lance was the last one to come out. And he's there with all the other elite green jersey guys and the polka dot jersey guys. And they're super friendly, chatting and waving to the crowd, signing things. And then with 10 seconds to go, they all the chatter stopped. It was amazing, like complete change of atmosphere. Helmets are
Huh.
on, strapped on. They don't look at each other anymore. It's like,
Uh,
and then the countdown and that siren goes, and they were gone. I
Game
took a
on.
photograph, and it's just a blur of bodies. And I was right there, so they barely had like two or three pedal strokes, and
Uh-huh.
it was the most extraordinary acceleration I've ever seen.
Yeah.
That wasn't in a machine of some sort.
I
So,
got to see the final stage of the Vuelta in Madrid
oh wow,
one year, and I was just astonished. They're going around this loop. They're going so fast, and
yeah.
they're shoulder to shoulder. They're touching like, okay, these
Oh,
guys are in a whole different world. They're in a whole different world.
Peloton, they're so close. If one guy does something slightly wrong, they're all over.
Done.
And the
Yeah.
crashes are terrible, as you know. They're, I mean, really serious. Look at Jonas Vingegaard, the crash he had last year, and
Yeah.
could barely ride last year's tour.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've seen starts. It's even more obvious how fast they're going if you're just somewhere along the way. So I remember being at this small intersection somewhere in Brittany, in France. We waited 3 hours with a couple of friends who were not cycling fans. They're saying, "What the heck are we doing here, Craig? You just got to wait, just wait. Nowhere to pee, so you go off to the bushes to whatever, just waiting." And then you hear the helicopters coming in the distance, and then this caravan comes through. Beautiful women throwing out free phone cards or water bottles, or.
Uh-huh.
And then then the breakaway, there were three of them in a breakaway, came around the corner down the bend, and within about I guess 10 seconds they were gone,
Yeah.
just straight past you.
That was
And then
it.
the Peloton was gone within another minute or so. They were just gone. And
Yeah.
my friend Robert looked at me and said, 3 hours for that, for 30 seconds? Come on,
Yeah,
right? That
it's
was
you
an
got to be a
amazing
special
experience.
fan. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's
hey,
right.
Dale, you had a question about predicting the future. Do you want to ask?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was with all your experience and all the travel and everything. I just wondered what you what think of the way the world is now and all the stuff you've seen and all the stuff you studied about. What's your view on the future? What do you 10 years out, maybe, what do you think it's going to look like in
Yeah,
this
it's a
world?
It's a really good question, Del. For like a small scale specialist historian, they don't, they wouldn't try and predict the future in any way. But if you teach larger scale history like I do, big history particularly, which focuses on major processes and changes and so on that have characterized Earth history and human history over tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, then you do get some sense of where these things are possibly going, without being too specific or predictive. But you see human population is slowing, population growth is slowing. So the concern we had maybe 20 years ago of just massive overpopulation, complete drain on resources of the planet, I think that's less of a concern now than it was.
Mm-hmm.
Global climate change is at like an unstoppable level right now. It almost wouldn't matter what we did at this stage. These forces have been set in motion since the Industrial Revolution. So oceans are going to rise, temperatures are going to warm, weather will become more unpredictable. Humans are going to have to learn to deal with that. I'm sure it'll be through technology, perhaps a lot of mass migration, moving away from coastal areas. I'm thinking of Florida particularly, but other
Oh
parts of the world,
yeah, absolutely.
moving away from that, moving inland. So those forces are beyond our control almost now. We can mitigate somewhat, probably. We can mitigate the worst excesses, but you don't see any real political will in many parts of the world to do that at the moment. You do in
Well,
Europe, Dave. We saw that in Europe, right?
Yes, yes,
A lot more concern
absolutely.
there, but United States less so.
Yeah.
So I think those forces still are unstoppable. That will lead to global conflict, undoubtedly. Hopefully not on a massive scale, but regional conflicts anyway. But we'll just keep going along as a species, inventing new technologies as the environment requires us to do, creating all the things that humans have done, art, culture, and so on. None of that will stop, I don't think. But it's a slightly bleaker future as you look ahead, I think, than what we've enjoyed in our lifetimes.
Dave, uh, this has been absolutely fascinating just to be part of this, but I hope our listeners will just stick around for the full episode of this uh, to hear what he just said, because what he's got street cred. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean?
Yes.
He's
Yeah.
got street cred, and he
Yeah,
said that very nicely. You didn't point any fingers, or you didn't say anything about anybody. You just said, "This is the way you see it," and I see that clearly. So I want to say thank you. Let me say thank you. If you don't mind, if we ended on this note, I would say thank you very much for being with us. And I would hope that you stay in touch with him. The two old bucks will check in on him every now and then. Maybe send him an email and see how he's doing, where he's at, and
yeah.
uh, come
Uh,
back and
Oh,
chat with us again sometime. Especially if you have something interesting you want to talk about, just
sure,
give
Del.
Dave a call and say,
I
"Listen,
got.
I got a great story for you, Dave. Let's go. We'll get out
Well,
there."
I've got a couple more questions for him. I'm not letting him go yet. This is
Okay, well, carry on, carry
not
on.
letting.
Del, thank you. Thank you for those remarks, Del. Uh, Historians are not often regarded as people that can talk about the future. And in fact, a lot of historians would think that's just crazy. I remember I was president of the World History Association for some years further back. And I suggested we needed a category of history because you have to put down what category of history you're interested in. And I said history of the future. And a number of the more
Mm.
traditional historians were outraged by this, saying, "Are you crazy? We're historians. We talk about the past, not the future." And I said, I think we've got something pretty useful to say about the future based on our understanding of the
Of the
past
past, exactly.
and of the present, basically. And so, anyway, it was a big battle to try and get that category included in the list. But I think most large scale historians who look at the big picture, pull right back and look at the big picture, feel confident in talking in a general way
Hmm.
about how these patterns will continue to unfold. So, anyway, but thank you for your kind words. I appreciate that. And I'd love to stay in touch, by the way.
Great. Hey, listen, if you got in, I know you have a teleporter in your backyard that you use. Now, when you get in your teleporter, what's your favorite place to go to in ancient history, place, time and place?
Dave, I knew you were going to ask me that. That's one of it's like on a ship, everyone says, "What's your favorite place to cruise to, Craig?" I'm saying, "Oh, I love the whole world. I love everywhere I've ever
Okay.
been. I love it." In terms of ancient history, well, of course, as a Silk Roads guy, I'm writing a book right now, my next book. And by the way, when you mentioned 100 books and other publications, about maybe 10 of those are books. The rest are chapters in books, compilations, papers and journals, and so on. I don't want your listeners to think I've written 100 books.
Right, 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 right.
Yeah. But my main academic publisher is Cambridge University Press in the UK, which is a very esteemed academic publisher. And the first book I wrote for them was called Empires of Ancient Eurasia, the First Silk Roads Era, covering the period from about 100 BC to about 250 AD, or as we say as world historians, BCE to CE, before the Common Era and of the Common Era. And I've since written a second book, a sequel to that, which covers the period from about 400 to 1000. And it's called The Battle for Inner Asia, Contesting the Silk Roads, circa 400 to 1000. It's focused on the Arab invasion of Central Asia, essentially coming out of the Arabian Peninsula in the 7th and 8th centuries, and the sort of titanic clash in the center of Asia between the Chinese, the vast Tang dynasty of China, and the Abbasid Caliphate of the Islamic world. They come together to contest control of all of Inner Asia, Central Asia, and so on. There's a battle called the Battle of Talas, Talas, fought in 751. It's not that huge a battle, but its consequences are really momentous. The Chinese decide to withdraw from Central Asia, and this allows all of that region to become Islamized as it is today. So it's a vast Muslim part of the world today, essentially because of this battle and the decision of the Chinese to pull back from the region, allowing Islam to spread everywhere. So of course that has dramatic consequences to this very day. So I would love to go back and be maybe at that one battle. I've walked a lot of battle sites all around the world, all the battle sites that Hannibal fought the Romans, the great Carthaginian general, many of the battle sites of the First World War, Second World War, a lot of Roman battle sites, Greek battle sites, and so on. I guess because I'm so focused on my next book at the moment, I'd love to go back into that and just get a taste of that clash between these Arab armies with their Syrian archers and so on, and the Tang dynasty with their heavy cavalry and their infantry, just coming together in this obscure river valley, which is on the border of Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan today, for this, what appears to be an inconsequential sort of scrappy affair that has these monumental consequences that still influence the world today. So I think that's where I'd like to go right now. But the whole world is...
It's a big world, yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
that's a great answer. And I think all our listeners by this time have gotten a good feel for how fascinating a life you've led and how dynamic you are. You really, I can see, our listeners can't see it, but I can see it in your eyes and in your expression that you really live it. You're really living all this, and I can see that you're more than just a historian. You're also an entertainer. You have to you really do make it come alive. And I noticed that on the ship every time, and we're hearing it and seeing it here again today. So,
but what I could say about that is, obviously, if you link the two careers that I've had, if you think about 20, 25 years as a professional musician, which is all about entertaining audiences of different types with different styles of music and so on, and then becoming an academic, which big part of that is lecturing, of course. Another big part of it we don't want to talk about is grading essays. We won't talk about that. That's another big part of it. But so to try and bring these two skills together, half a lifetime as a performer of some sort, now half a lifetime lecturing to folks who are not history majors but who want to learn some in-depth information about the places we're going to and have it presented in a way that's engaging. It's like, to me, that's not rocket science at all. And apologies to anyone else out there, other professors, but I often wonder why so many lecturers can be quite boring.
Quite boring. Yeah.
Quite boring. The poor students are sitting there barely able to keep awake because didn't go to bed till 4:30 in the morning. And there's a PowerPoint screen up there with just some bullet point text, no images whatsoever. The professor's just reading the bullet points off. The students have already got a handout of the same bullet points.
So why are they bothered? Yeah.
And they're wondering why the kids are falling asleep on their desks.
Yeah. Oh,
it's not that hard, I don't think.
Anyway, well, listen, I think we've done an hour here. This is probably one of our longest episodes, and it's an hour that's gone by very quickly.
Yeah.
I think Dale had kind of remind me like we are rolling here, man. But this was great, and I want to thank you very much for this, Craig. And maybe we can get you back again sometime after you've got some more cruises under your belt, and find out how you're looking at the world at that point. So With that, this is Old Buck Dave saying thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for Craig for being here, and thanks to Dale for just being you. So until next time, this is Old Buck Dave saying bye-bye.
Old Buck Dale saying we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, guys.